Hi everyone, I'm Saleha and this is Chai, Chat and Community. Tonight, we talk about the Victorian state elections and the role of the Victorian Electoral Commission. But before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting tonight and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Meet my guest, Kano Ravalji, who has been on my webcast many times and I love having him all the time. Kano, for those who don't know you, do you want to tell them a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Krushnadevsinh, or also known as Kano. I'm a migrant from India. I moved here when I was about 7 years old with my family and been living in Victoria, Melbourne for many years now, for 15 years now. And have been on the show a few times, wearing multiple different hats, posing as a young person, talking about mental health, talking about the intergenerational between the brown communities, and now talking about the election. So I'm very excited to be here because I think it's a great platform, and I think it's what Saleh is doing is amazing. And I'm very excited to talk about the election. I think which is very recent. You might be thinking, did we not just have another election just before? But for Victorians, there's another election coming in November. And so my job, I work in the Victorian Electoral Commission as a COLD project officer. So my job is to work with COLD communities, or otherwise known as multicultural communities, and teach them how to vote, why democracy is important, and how to get involved.
Thank you, Kano. So let's start off with, what does the Victorian Electoral Commission do?
So the Victorian Electoral Commission, there's three main things that it does. The first thing it does, the most important thing it does, is run elections. And so it runs elections for the Victorian elections and then also local council elections. So I live in Werribee, so we would be the Widnam local council election. So those are the two elections that we look after for. And later in November, the election that is coming up is the Victorian Electoral Commission. The Victorian election. So that's what we're going to be looking after. The second thing we do is look after the electoral roll. So in Australia, to vote, you have to sign up. You have to fill in a form called an enrollment form. And so you have to, and that's what we look after, make sure everyone's enrolled. People who haven't enrolled, we make sure we reach out to them and get them involved.
So I'll just stop you there, Kano. Yeah. So how do you enroll? Does it come in an email or does it come by post? How does it come?
So there's multiple ways the enrollment form comes in. The first step is, if you're a young person and as soon as you turn 17, you get a letter at home saying, you're 17 now, please enroll. But I know when my family, we became citizens, we got them at our ceremony. So when you become a citizen, when you have your ceremony for your citizenship, you get a form as well to enroll you onto the election. And also, if you feel like you're not too sure, you can go on our website and check out if you're enrolled or not. And you can also get the form at Australian Post, or you can do it online as well.
Great. So,
So sorry, the last thing, am I correct? The last thing that we do is, I think it's incredibly important, is teach people about democracy and voting. So that is also another part of the VC, because all you want to do is, and what I want to do is make sure the community is empowered to vote. The community knows what it's up for, what democracy looks like. Especially, I know, being a migrant coming from India myself, voting is very different in India, compared to Australia. If you haven't voted, in Australia we use numbers. And you get two ballot papers. It's very complex as well. You have to fill in two different ballot papers. You have to write a bunch of numbers. Whereas in other countries, we either, if you're a refugee or a migrant, we never vote, or we just press buttons, or there's different ways of voting. So it's very important that we teach it from my perspective, multicultural communities. And especially, I think the recent stat came out, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 1 in 2 people,
one in 3.
Yeah, 1 in 3 people are born overseas, which is insane when you think about it.
51%. 51%.
Yeah, that is huge.
Yeah, actually, it's 1 in 2. No, I stand corrected. It is 1 in 2, because it's 51.3, I think, percent people were born overseas. Yeah, I don't remember voting in India ever.
Yeah, and I think after England, I think we're the second biggest, the Indian community, in terms of the communities that live here. So I think it's very important.
Emerging community, yes, absolutely.
So it's very important.
I think the last couple of years, Indians have been the largest migrants who are calling Australia home now. So yes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are becoming citizens as well.
Yeah. So how impartial is the Victorian Electoral Commission?
Yeah, so impartiality, big word. But what it means is that we are the umpires. That's how I like to say, because I love cricket. We're the umpires. We're not with any team. We're not with any party. We are independent. So we're part of the government, but we're not run by them. So whatever happens in Parliament, we don't get affected. We are independent, and we run the elections how we wanted to, whatever our legislation says, and we don't favor anyone. We're in the middle. And so as a VEC employee, I'm the same. I don't favor any party. I don't support anyone publicly. And so I have my views, but when I'm on a public forum like this, or when I'm talking to a lot of people, when I'm doing my work, I have to be in the middle, impartial. So that's what it means.
So it's an umpire, whether it's cricket or footy or, tennis. So VEC is an umpire, basically, to put it in layman's words. Everybody understands that.
Yeah, to make sure everyone follows the rules.
Yes.
Elections can be a bit, very big public event. So we want to make sure they're done properly and
I think what most people don't realize is if you don't vote, you get fined.
Yes, you do. If you're allowed to vote, if you're a citizen, you're enrolled, and you're over 18 and you don't vote, you get a letter at home saying, "Why didn't you vote?" and you get a fine. So it's very important you do.
Yes, and now they have online voting too, isn't it? I hope they have that for the state elections too, because I know for the federal elections they did.
I feel like Victorian one don't have online voting. I don't think we'll get it for a while now, in my opinion, unless anything changes. But I think we'll stick to probably pen and paper. But
what happens if a person is positive?
I think they'll do telephone voting. So you can call up and you say your name. I'm not too sure how it would look.
Phone voting.
Yeah, so I don't think we have online voting, but I know for the Australian election, the federal election, they had the phone call voting.
Phone call, yes, yeah.
So the way it works is you call up, you say your name, and then when you vote, you actually get transferred to a different person who doesn't know your name or doesn't know anything about you. So it's still secret.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Okay, yeah. Wow.
So I'm not too sure exactly in Victoria what the regulations will be in November regarding COVID, because we never know. I think the past 2 years have proved that we cannot predict anything, and so I don't think any plans are in place at the moment. But we'll see if anything changes by November.
Okay. Has the date been fixed?
It is the 26th of November. It is always the last Saturday of November. So for Victoria, it's always fixed last Saturday of November. So it is the 26th of November. Okay. But I know a lot of us are busy. You might be traveling overseas, so you can actually vote 2 weeks in advance as well.
Yeah.
If you don't want to wait in line, or if you have any issues, you can vote 2 weeks in advance.
So why do we have another election?
It's a very interesting question, because I feel like people always get me, because I already go out and tell people election's coming up, and they're like, we just had an election, why do we have another one? And so I like to tell people that the election that just went past was the federal government, which is the whole of Australia, and the one that we have in November is for Victoria. So just for Victoria, no other states or territories, just for Victoria. And the reason why we have that is because the federal government and the state look after different things. So the federal ones look after the big things like army, immigration, tax, all those big things that impact everyone. That's what federal looks after. Then state for us is everything that affects us Victorians, such as things like public transport, education, Victoria Police, Vic Roads, all those little infrastructure things that affect day-to-day. I think in COVID, it proved that different governments had different restrictions, different states. And so that's why we have a Victorian election, because we live in Victoria. And so all those things that affect us Victorians, we'll vote for that in November.
Great. So how does this election impact me, Kano?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all those services that I mentioned, I'm sure a lot of us either have kids in education, or we take public transport, or we take roads, or we have businesses that are set up. All those things that the government has an impact in, that's what you get impacted in, because the government that comes in, they'll allocate new funding, they'll have different viewpoints. And so this election will impact whatever your views are around climate change, or whatever the topic is, whatever you're interested in, it will impact that. So it's very important to make sure, okay, this is a new election. Let me see what I care about. What are some of the things that I want to look after for myself now, or maybe for my kids or my family, my community, and make sure I vote for the party or the person that I want to vote for.
So it's basically our say.
100%. I think the way the Australian democracy works is that we vote and we have representatives in the government who talk on our behalf. So it's very important that the people that represent our views are actually those people. And so it's very important in our local area, we put them in the parliament.
Most important question for me, who can enroll in Australia and who can vote in this election?
Yeah, so who can vote in this election? First of all, you have to be over 18, regardless of anything, over 18. And to vote in Victorian election, you must be an Australian citizen. And so you still have time to become a citizen up until November. So you have to be a citizen. And the last thing is, we talked about before, which is you have to fill in an enrollment form, which normally you get either when you turn 17 or when you become a citizen. So I might ask you, Sally, are you a citizen?
I am. Been here too long.
Did you get a form when you did the ceremony, or?
I don't remember, to be honest. But I know I've voted. How many ever elections? We came in 2004. By 2006, we were citizens. So I think how many ever elections we've had, I've voted every single time. And I tend to vote early because, when you're working, weekends are always busy. You get caught up in stuff. So I always vote early. It's easier to get out of work and do that during lunchtime. And there are always voting centers close to where you work, or, and I think the timings are pretty good. I've either done it before going to work or during lunchtime. So I think it's 8 to 6, isn't it? That
Yeah,
kind of
I think it's 8 to 6 or 9 to 6. They're pretty good hours. So normally you can find time because you have the election day is the 26th, but as you said, you can do it before as well, up 2 weeks before, and you don't have to sign up anywhere. You can walk in and vote, so you don't have to be like, "Oh, I'm coming early." You just go in, get it done with, and usually the lines are shorter as well if you go beforehand compared to on the day where thousands of people are voting, and sometimes not so much, but sometimes you do have to wait in line if you go to a busy polling place.
So how does this election impact me, Kano?
So again, I think, as I mentioned, whatever you're passionate about, whether that's in your community, whether that's in your local area, whatever, for example, if it's roads, or for example, let's say I was in university, and I know public transport prices could be going up or could be going down. And so I want to make sure.
Going down. Have you seen the petrol prices?
Petrol prices are through the roof. But if things like, someone could come out and say, they're going to change something, and if you really resonate with that, you want to make sure that happens.
Okay. Is there a closing date for enrollment?
Yeah, so enrollment closes on the 8th of November, at 8 p.m.
That's 2 weeks? 3 weeks?
Yes, about 3 weeks, I think. So yeah, about 3 weeks. So it closes on the 8th of November. So you still have a bit of time. So make sure you fill in that form and send it through to us by 8th of November. That is very important, because if you don't, then you won't be able to vote on the election.
Okay. So why is voting important, and why should we vote?
Yeah, I think
we've been talking about it, things that are important. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a different angle on this one. The way I think about it, coming from a migrant perspective, is Australia's an incredible country. There's so many good things here: services, roads, education. Coming from, obviously being a migrant or a refugee, here life is amazing, right? There's so many good opportunities. You're safe. You have an opportunity to build a beautiful life for yourself and your kids. And the way I like to tell that to people, especially people who have either grown up here or be like, "Oh, why should I vote? Because everything's so good here." Right? Regardless of what government's in control, my day-to-day is not impacted too much. And the way I like to say that is because of the way people have voted in the past. It's because of the policies and the things that have done, 50, 100 years ago, that we're able to be in this position. And we want to make sure in the future it stays that way, or it gets even better. And so we want to make sure it gets to a way that we want it to look like. And so it's very important to vote, even though I know when we come from different countries, whatever party's in control is very important. So if you can go out, you can't go out, or you can catch public transport, or you can't catch public transport, or can you say that, or can you not say that? We're here in Australia, we're quite lucky. We don't have to really worry about too many of those things, but it's still very important to make sure in the future or in the now, those things are catered for.
Great. How do we find out who we want to vote for?
I might ask you this question since you
And,
have it.
and I will also ask you
Yep.
because, and if you can tell us a brief info on how to vote. So
Yep.
how do we find out? I think there are these 12 candidates, or am I thinking of the federal election? But there are two sets of papers, right?
Yeah, so there's two sets of papers. One is the lower house, which is a legislative assembly, which is the green house, and you have the upper house one, which is red, which is called the legislative council. So in Australia, when we go to vote, we vote twice, or we have two pieces of paper to fill in on. And normally, when you go in on the paper, there's like, depending on in your area, you can have 5 people or you can have 20 people. Depends on how many people want to run for candidacy. And the way you vote is in very simple. You go with number 1. You put for the person you most want to win the election. You give them number 1, and then you give number 2 to the person you second most want to win. Then you give number 3 to your first favorite, and then you go until you've numbered every single box. Because the way we have a thing called preferential voting, where let's say your first person does win, then your vote will still count, and then your second person will be taken care of. But if second person does win, then your third vote will count. So every single person that you number is very important, because let's say your first one doesn't win, but your sixth
people. So you have to number each and every one of them.
Yep, every single box. If you miss one, your vote does not count. You have to number every single box. So it's very important to know, if you make a mistake, that is okay. You won't get a fine. You only get a fine if you don't vote. So if let's say you vote and you go home like, oh no, I made a mistake. I missed the number, but it's okay. You won't get a fine. You only get a fine for not voting. So that's for the lower house. And the upper house is a bit more complex. You have two options. You can vote above the line or below the line, but we can get to that. I think we'll have another show closer up to the election to just talk about voting. But going back to your question, I want to ask you this: how do you, let's say there's an election coming up and you voted a few times, how do you find your information about who to vote for?
I look for, I read the news all the time. That's the first thing I do when I wake up. And I think every spare minute I get, I am constantly looking at, I think sometimes it's an overload of information. So anybody who's talking my language, when I mean, and by language, I do not mean English, Hindi, Sinhalese or Nepalese, but talking my language in the way I feel. Climate change is very, very important. Safety for women, very, very important. Clean living, all these things are very, very important. And multiculturalism, isn't that what we are all for? So anybody who's speaking my language is a person I will vote for.
And I think, sorry, go.
As long as they're not right-wing politicians.
Okay, I can't comment on that too much.
No, I know you can't, which is why it's easier for me to comment.
But let's say those were some of the things that I would passionate about. What I would do is, obviously, we have our mobile phones, WhatsApp, Facebook. We have all this information, as you said, sometimes too much information coming up saying, vote for me. And so that's what I would find. Oh, this person is really supportive of this, or this person is really supportive of this. And so that's what I would find, a bit of information. Also, I think now, I know in my community, there's a lot of Indian candidates, and they do talk in their own language, like whether that's Gujarati, Punjabi, Hindi, or whatever language it is, they do it in their language. So that's how you can find a bit more information. Or you can always go on the internet or online and find information. There's always information available. Or I know in election time, you won't be missed. There'll be posters up everywhere.
I was going to say that. So politicians don't only wake up when it's close to elections. The next 3 or 4 years, silence. So I wish they were a bit more engaged. I know you cannot say anything. This is me speaking. It does not reflect on you. Okay. But yes, I wish they would be a little bit more engaged. And, actually, I mean, I don't know what my politicians are doing. I mean, I met a few people. They were like, oh, I'm standing with this for the local elections. I'm like, really? Okay. never seen you, never heard of you. But
See, that's what I actually love about the Australian democracy is that anyone can stand up. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, how can I be involved? Anyone can stand up for as long, anyone can stand up to be a candidate. There's a few things that you have to tick off legally, but anyone can stand up as a candidate regardless of, if you're popular or not popular, or you have support from someone or not support from someone, which I really do like about the Australian democracy is that
hang on,
everyone
you
has a
don't
chance.
need support. Do you need an X number of people who should support you or no?
Oh, I think I'm not exactly sure of the numbers, so I can't really comment. But I think there is a few things that you have to tick off, but it's nothing too too out there that you have to like really think about. It's fairly it's something that a lot of people can do. There isn't a lot of regulation, I would say, or things that you have to be like, oh, I can't get that, or I can't get that. There isn't enough. There aren't a lot of barriers. That's what I would say to standing up as a candidate.
Okay.
But I think
Let's
what you've
talk
added.
Sorry,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
tell me.
Just going back to the election, sometimes you on your mail, you get a lot of letters, from all these different parties, different candidates saying, this is what I'll do, this is what I do. And so you can find a bit more information from the ballots there as well.
The flyers that come into your mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are most people are like me and would throw it into the yellow bin. Unless there is a fridge magnet, because that's the one that you really need.
With a calendar as well. It's good with the holidays and everything.
This has been very short and sweet. So I'm going to ask you my last question.
Yep.
How do we get involved? Tell me about active citizenship, how to help and share the community. And then I will ask my most important question at the end.
Perfect. So the three ways I think you can be involved. Number one, I'd love for you to stand up as a candidate. If you feel like I want to make a change, I want to have my voice heard, want to step it up. Number one, you can stand up as a candidate. There aren't a lot of barriers. I think you can look at the fine print on our website, but number one, you can get involved in elections is standing up as a candidate. The second thing you can do is get involved.
I want to ask you a question here. So if this hypothetical question, I'm not standing for elections, but if I was to stand for elections, there is also a financial burden that I will have to carry, right? Because I know people who have stood for council elections, and the amount of money they have spent is been incredible. So that is something that people should be aware of, isn't it?
100%. You have to market yourself, and you have to attract voters. So that is something you would have to consider is, or do I have the time? Do I have the expertise and also the financial? But
yes,
you can stand up. If you can stand up if you want to, but those are some of the things that you should probably consider as well if you are willing to go into that. So number one, stand up as a candidate. Secondly, is get behind the community, because voting can be a bit difficult. Voting can be a bit hard. It can be difficult to explain. So if you educate yourself by coming today or going on a website, learning a bit more, you can go and educate others on how to vote, get involved in democracy. And then if you wanted to, you can stand behind, a few of the issues that if you wanted to, you can go out there, raise your voice, find out people who support you, and maybe change their mind as well. And the last thing is you can also work on the election day. So you can work for the election. The way I think about it, the election's a community thing, because when the election comes around, there's so many thousands of people involved in the whole democracy. So there's always opportunities for you to get involved and get paid as well.
Okay. So let's talk about work opportunities that people can have at the Victorian Electoral Commission in the coming elections.
So for the Victorian Electoral Commission, you have to be over 18, and you have to have a working visa. So whether that's a citizenship, whether it's a PR, or I think there's a few working visas where you are you're permitted to work. And so if you have those two things, then you can work. And during the election, closer to the date, there's lots of opportunities, whether that's working in the office, whether that's working on polling days, pre and post, or that's working on the election day, or there's lots of people that get hired to also count the votes, because all the votes are counted manually by people. And so you can work up to over a month if you have the time for it, and if you're if you have time and you also can travel to the position, there's lots of working opportunities, and it's pretty good money as well. It's a couple $100 to work on election day, just if you work on the day. And so you start it early in the morning, you help people run the election, and then you would count the votes as well. And it's pretty good money, and it looks very good in a resume as well.
Job.
Yeah, so it's up to you. There's a few part-time opportunities, these casual opportunities as well. There's lots of casuals. So that's, you can work just on the election day, or I think, as you mentioned, you can go up to 2 weeks before and work every single day if you wanted to.
I'm going to type the email address where people can look for these career opportunities. If you tell me where they are, what's the email address that they can, or website?
Yeah, website I think might be easier because my email address will be very long, given my name.
No, I don't want people contacting you directly. So so it's VC, is it?
Yeah,
www.vc.
vc.vic.gov.au.
.gov.au. Is it careers or is it?
I can work with us. Here we go. I can post it. There we go. So there's a few ongoing jobs.
Okay,
there's also
I'm just going to copy and paste what you sent me. Yep, thank you, Kano.
Perfect. So there's a few ongoing jobs at the office, and then it was also just working for the election as well.
Yep, I'm going to just write this. So
perfect.
Working with VC. Perfect. Yep, I've got that. So
and I think it's very special what the VEC does, because for the federal election you have to be citizen, whereas for the Victorian election you just have to have a working visa. So if you're a migrant, if you're a refugee, or if you're an international student and you have working rights, there's really good opportunities to get involved, learn about the elections, and also get some money as well.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to say, Kanu, before this is the shortest conversation you and I have ever had?
I know.
27 minutes, 37 seconds.
I know, it's gone very quick. We've been all talking about elections, and
you've covered just about everything. I think we are meeting up once before the elections, isn't it? And I think you will have a lot more to say.
Yeah, and I think we'll be talking about voting, because I didn't want to cover in this session because voting it's a very, very big thing, especially the 2 ballot papers and how your vote works. And so for the next session, we'll be going into a bit more detail on that, which will be very interesting. But I think for me, I would just say I'm very excited for the election. I know it's a lot of work, and people will be like, oh, another election coming up. But the way I like to think about it, it's an opportunity for change. It's an opportunity to have your voice heard. Regardless,
opportunity to have our voices heard and things that are important to us. Look at what happened at the federal election. People wanted their voices to be heard, and we've had so many amazing independents, isn't it?
But I can't comment too much on it.
Yes, I know you
have to be entirely impartial. But yeah, it's a chance to have your voices heard.
Okay. Thanks, Kanu. It's been wonderful as always, and I will see you next month.
Perfect. Thank you. See you, everyone.
Okay. Good night. Bye.
Thanks.